Good evening, team. Thank you all for jumping on.
Hi.
Hey, good evening.
I am making the settings so that the only people who can talk are co-hosts.
Oh, wow, that's a feature? I didn't know that.
Yeah, on the bottom, we're under security. If you look at that, you can see allow participants to share screen, chat, or unmute themselves. If you uncheck the unmute themselves, they cannot.
Hello, Mr. K.
Hey, Dr. Brent. Good evening.
I'm doing well. Good evening. Good
Hey,
evening.
most of the admin team is on already. And,
I'm like 10 people in the room already. Who is this?
Yeah,
So
it's
your
our
team.
team.
Okay. All right. I love that. That's awesome to have.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
So I'm not gonna open the floodgates until really just maybe 5:59.
Oh no, I just was surprised there was 10 people in here. That's all. Couple of questions here. Wait a minute. I'm just trying to get to make sure I can save my screen. I just hate having to flop between two screens. It just annoys me to no end. But anyway, I can share it. All right. I'll do that now. There it is. Can y'all see that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
Uh-oh, that date is for last year.
Oh, thank you for catching that. And this is the wrong freaking slide. Yes. Wait a minute. Command copy. Wait a minute. Thank you for catching that. Whew, good catch. It's right here. Command paste. And this is it.
Dr. Brent, so I do have a brief PowerPoint that I do want to work through myself. So when, I know you've got a couple things on that.
Yeah, I'm not going to share the whole time. Nope.
Yep. I just wanted to give you that heads up.
Okay. Because in fact, when I say I'm going to just stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you, would that be okay?
Yep.
All
Yep,
right.
that works fine. What I'm hoping, so what I just so you know, the setting that I have right now, Dr. Brent, is that the only people who can talk are those who are designated as co-hosts. No one will be able to unmute themselves except for the co-hosts.
Right.
And
Right.
I prefer to leave it that way because it can get very unwieldy once you get over 100 people on a call and someone's yelling at their kids to be quiet or whatever.
Okay, so what's going to have to happen is, can you manage that for me, that piece for me? Because Shalonda on my team, she's going to need to be unmuted because she's going to help me field the questions as well.
Yeah, that'd be fine. You just need to let me know her name, Shalonda.
Yeah, let me get that information.
There's only 4 people in the waiting room right now, and a couple of them are iPhones.
Okay.
It doesn't have a name, so.
We're all here also, Dr. Brent, to help with questions as well as needed.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna need your help as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I just want someone like 2 of us from PTSO and then also administration to chime in too.
Okay.
There's gonna be a lot of questions,
Yep.
I'm sure. But yeah, it's gonna be Shalonda Stevens.
Okay. So, Counselor, can I also ask another question since, the questions in the chat sort of come up organically and then stuff we haven't covered? Do do you want us, once you've covered like the PowerPoint, do you want us to just to drop a copy of that in the chat? Or
If I understood your question, yeah, say that again. So like do you want me, are you asking to share the PowerPoint into the chat?
correct, yeah, like once, if it's things that you've already gone over and we've discussed, like we don't want to go back or stop the whole meeting, you know what I mean, to address
Yep.
items.
I'm emailing you guys right now the links for tonight. There's 2 different links that I'm sending you. One, because once we get in the middle of it, if we happen to hit capacity 300, we are currently streaming on YouTube right at this very moment, FYI, but no one has the link to it.
Okay.
And so no one's able to access, but I don't want anyone to send out that link. I'd rather not like broadcast that we're on YouTube unless we reach our capacity is my thought on this. And so I just sent you the admin team an email that asking you guys to broadcast on band if we hit 300 and to share that link that way. And so you guys have that in your email along with the link to this presentation that I'll be sharing as well. So you can drop that in the chat as well. Does that make sense? So yeah, please do. If parents are asking questions that we definitely have already covered, or they just say, hey, can we get a copy of the presentation? Please drop that in the chat. Hey, Lee.
Hey.
Hey, Mahoney. Hey, Addison.
Good evening, everyone.
Christopher Brown is trying to get in. I don't know if that's
No.
We'll wait till his dad gets here.
Oh, I thought you were asking me.
But I don't know if that's Lou Brown trying to get in under his son's account.
I thought Lou said he couldn't make it. So, no, I doubt it.
Yeah, he usually doesn't log in under his son's account. And there are no restrictions on this. Anyone can access it.
Yeah, because I asked him to help field the questions, and he said he wouldn't be able to make it.
All right, I gotta go run and grab a beverage. I'll be right back. Anyone else have any procedural questions or anything before we dive in?
No, sir.
Dr. Brian, could you remind me the name again of the individual who is it Shalonda Stevens?
Yes.
Got it. I'm gonna let her in.
Thank you. Yeah, if you manage the Zoom for me, that'd be great.
working together on this. Hey, Miss Stevens, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, thanks for joining us. Dr. Brent asked me to make you a co-host, just so you know, the only people who will have the ability to unmute are co-hosts tonight, and you're one of them.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Brent, I think I will wait till about 5:58 or 5:59 to start letting
That'll
people
work.
in. Sound good?
That sounds great.
I'm going to let in Nurse Spate.
And I'm going to start talking as soon as you let people in, so there won't be any intro music. I like to start on time.
Hello, family. I'm still
Hello.
on mommy duties.
Hey, Mahoney, yeah. Hey, Nurse Spate, thanks for joining us tonight. I just let you in a little early and made you a co-host, so you can pipe in and feel free to jump in at any point you might like. Thank you for your support tonight.
No problem.
We're going to start letting folks in about 30 seconds to a minute. We only have 40 some in the waiting room right now. I turned the heat up in my house. It's cold in my house.
You said how many people are in the waiting room, Doc? Mr. K?
50 at the moment. I'm going to start letting them in right now. It's 5:59, okay?
That'll be great.
All right, let's do it. So again, the only people who will be able to unmute themselves are those who are co-hosts. That's everyone that's in this room currently. And so all questions will be fielded through the chat primarily.
Okay, welcome everyone. I see we're all coming in. So welcome, welcome, welcome. PTSO would like to welcome you to our town hall meeting in conjunction with or in cooperation with Bowie High School and the admin team. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're about to get started. And our focus this evening is on returning to in-person learning, which takes place on Tuesday, January 18th. And so there's a lot of critical information that we need as parents, need to know in order to be prepared, in order for us to, as parents, to prepare, well prepared and to prepare our children. So before we get started, we think it's very appropriate, PTSO thinks it's very appropriate for us at this time to pay tribute to Sophia Peck. So let's at this moment give 11 seconds of silence in memory of Sophia Peck. So 11 seconds counting now. All right, thank you. Thank you. And we also have with us our PTSO officers, our Vice President for 2022 seniors is Sharon Cooper, Ms. Sharon Cooper and Mr. Lou Brown. If you're here, please raise your virtual hand. Also, Cheryl Perry and Shalonda Stevens for our Vice President for 2023, our juniors. And for our sophomores, Vice Presidents for 2024, we have Ms. Crystal Peters, Shamika Price, and Shannon Rogers. And then last, we have Vice President for 2025, freshman, Ms. Jennifer McClooney. And then we have our treasurer, Tan Williams. So let's give some appreciation or show some appreciation to our officers who are serving us in our community. All right. Before I turn it over to Mr. K, I want to also show you our website, Bowie High School website, PTSO. So please, if you haven't visited our website, take time out to visit our website. And on this website, you will find a link where you can access a membership form for you to complete. We need you to join so we can get some support. All right, so again, we need your support. Now, how do you get to this website? It's at Bowie High School's website, actually. And you go to PTSO, and then there's a link for our website. So it's right on the school's website. So check us out. All right, I'm gonna stop talking because you come here to get the updates. And so I'm gonna turn it over to you, Mr. K, and you go ahead and take over.
Well, hey, Dr. Brent, thank you so much. And thank you, PTSO, and Happy New Year, Bowie High School community. It's great to see you all. I just really appreciate everyone jumping online tonight. And here we are again. This is, I feel like, at least the third time we've had a meeting called Returning to In-Person Learning. And it's really true. And so here we are again doing this in January of 2022, in the middle of another COVID surge that is very serious and gripping our nation, but we are finding a way together to return to in-person learning in Prince George's County Public Schools as safely as possible, while trying to minimize as many risks and maximize student learning and opportunity. And that's really what this is about. And so I'm going to share my screen. And now I'm doing that, there are a lot of team members joining tonight, and I wanted to give them a chance to introduce themselves before actually I start talking too much and before we really get into Q&A. And so team members, if you could please just unmute yourselves and say, hi, who are you? Which students do you serve? And what is your primary role at the school? Start with the admin team, and then there's other team members as well.
Good evening. I am Maureen Delaney, and I am the proud supporter of the class of 2022. So it is our year here.
Greetings. My name is Rashida Addison, and I am the liaison administrator for the class of 2023, as well as for the English department and World Languages department.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andre Esters, and I am the grade 10 liaison administrator, and I support also science, health, physical education, and the dance department.
Good evening. My name is Joshua Jackson, ninth grade administrator, class of 2025. Last names at A through K. Good evening.
And of course, they left the final class of 2025, Mr. Jackson and I. For last, I am Aisha Mahoney, last names L through Z. I also support social studies, ESOL, and technology.
Thank you, team. We're also joined, I'm happy to have the support here from Nurse Spate, one of our amazing health professionals. Nurse Spate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Nurse Spade. I cover mainly the annex, but I'm also a support for the main building as well. I'm sorry, ninth grade campus.
Thanks, Nurse Spate. We also have a number of professional school counselors and other teachers and staff members on the call tonight. They're part of the Bowie High School community, they're the parent teacher student organization. And so I'm not going to ask every staff member who's on to introduce themselves, but Ms. Kaplan, I know your department chair, professional school counseling team, you're on the call, and I did make you co-host. Would you mind just saying hi as well, because we might be piping in the chat as well.
Good evening. I am Ms. Kaplan, school counseling department chair, and I also service students 10th through 12th grade, STAQ through Z.
And so these are the team members who serve your students day in and day out at Bowie High School, and so many more, and the teachers who do so as well. Mr. Lee, did you introduce yourself?
No, I lost power right as we were coming on. Darren Lee, I'm special ed administrator. I'll be taking part in a lot of the logistics of distributing things coming up. So those are my roles here.
Yeah, thank you. So these are the team members who are serving our students every day, but also you might see them answering questions that come up in the chat. Tonight's format, the way we've kind of working on this is really, once you get to over 100 people in a Zoom room, it makes the most sense to kind of mute everyone except for the people who are going to be doing the most talking. And so really the way we're going to be asking questions tonight is via the chat. And some questions will get answered just simply textually, and some will get answered verbally. I think we'll be working together with PTSO to try to figure out which questions absolutely should get addressed verbally, as well as which ones might just be able to get handled textually through the chat forum. Our hope is that we can work through this together. And let me preface all of this by saying, you know, I am certainly not a mental health professional. I'm not a public health officer or a public health official or expert. I'm an educator. I'm a principal, and what I try to be my best at is helping to operate a school in the healthiest way possible to create a safe, engaging learning environment for our students. And so I strive to do that to the best of my ability, and that's really what this is about. So hopefully we can hear the things that if you participated in Dr. CEO Monica Goldson's town hall last night, where she really could give you the more global vision of what the district is aiming at and how we're trying to do this. The goal of tonight's meeting is really to try to have a more granular focus on how we're going to translate this into Bowie High School. What does this look like at Bowie High School, returning to in-person learning? And so I'm going to share my screen. I've got just a couple brief slides that I want to work through to present some basic information that I think covers many of the questions that people have. And then we'll have time for Q&A following that. So, as we all know by now, all students are scheduled to return to in-person learning this coming Tuesday, right after the Martin Luther King holiday on Monday. And I'm just going to say, like, what is actually going to be different when students come back? And hopefully, if you've been reading the emails that are coming through the school system or listening to Dr. Goldson talk, the main differences that we're going to see and feel are what we're just calling them sort of enhanced mitigation efforts by the school system. Mitigation efforts meaning like just different ways that we're trying to minimize the effects of COVID-19, all right? Both the health disruptions and the exchange of the virus in the community. One thing that I think is going to make a big difference is that we're going to have increased access and frequency for COVID testing for students and for staff. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but we're going to have rapid test kit distribution coming on a bi-weekly basis to every student at Bowie High School. And there will be increased weekly random testing for students who sign up for it, for parents who sign their children up for this and give consent for them to be tested on a weekly random basis. Those are PCR tests that take place. We also are going to have increased distribution of KN95 masks to staff and students, something we've never had before on the district level. We're going to have enhanced enforcement of mask wearing rules in the school. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There's new quarantine rules about for how long staff and students should quarantine if they are positive cases or possible exposures. Talk a little bit more about that. And there's new restrictions for athletics for the short term and long term for this remainder of this winter season. And so those are the things that are going to look and feel differently. And this is the top level discussion of that. And I'll get into some of those details in a bit. But that's really most of what's going to look and feel different about Bowie High School when students come in on Tuesday. So the testing kits. This is one of the first things. And I'm going to turn to Mr. Lee. I'm going to give you a chance to talk, but I'm going to just give the surface level facts real quick right here. But today we actually did get a shipment of test kits. They're the rapid test kits for students. They will receive them in school next week, probably not right away on Tuesday, but likely on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. Students will be sent home with a test kit. Each test kit has 2 tests in it. Okay. And what the district is asking students and families to do, and there'll be more details coming out about this in the days ahead. But every Sunday, starting with January 23rd, so not this Sunday, but the following, we're asking students, families to upload, to self-administer these rapid tests, 1 rapid test for the week on that Sunday, and then to upload the results into a portal that the school system is still actively creating. So that database and portal is being created, and there'll be a website for families to submit those test results on a weekly basis. And so, like I said, there's 2 tests per kit. And so for January 23rd, students will submit test number 1 from the kit that they received. And then on Sunday, January 30th, we're asking students to submit test number 2 from the kit that they received. And they'll upload that into an online portal and navigate themselves accordingly. If the results are positive, that activates a certain protocol automatically, and we'll talk about what that is. And if they're negative, no changes needed, and you continue to come to school as possible. After the January 30th, students will then receive another test kit with 2 more tests in it and do the same thing for the following 2 Sundays. And then again, after that 2 weeks later, they'll get another 3rd test kit where they'll do it again for 2 more Sundays. And so the hope is this is something we haven't been doing on the district level. And I'll also add, it is not a requirement right now for students to do this. We are simply asking and hoping that as many students and families will do this as possible, because this is really our best tool for limiting the number of students who are going to be coming in. If we can test and say, hey, look, on Sunday, I tested negative. We have good reason to believe that you're not actively carrying the virus. And so we can come to school. It's just one more barrier that we're setting up for decreasing the total number of people who might be coming into the school who are actively carrying COVID-19. Mr. Lee, did you want to add anything about what our preliminary plans are for the distribution of these test kits?
Yeah, so what the plan is to distribute the test kits through lunches. We're coordinating the logistics of that right now. There will be some PSA videos that will be produced by myself with the student team to go over, how to access the kit, how to log in saying that you received a kit, and also, if time permits, demonstrations on actually how to administer your kit. But all of those things are in the work right now.
And forgive us that we don't have every single detail ironed out about this. This is information that's really been fast moving and provided to us within the last 24 hours ourselves at the schoolhouse. So we're really getting the information, getting the materials, and figuring out what is the best way to distribute them to students in an efficient way. So I think next week, Wednesday or Thursday, you can expect all students to come home with their test kit for the next 2 weeks. And then every 2 weeks, they'll be re-upping this and testing accordingly. And that's what we're asking all families to please do this, because it'll be one of our best tools. Team, are there any questions that came up real quick related to test kits or testing that we want to try to address before we move on?
Yeah, I was actually typing a response. There was a question about how about those students who leave early, and there will be a distribution for those students in the morning. Again, logistically, we're working out the location and when those students specifically would pick them up. So, but yes, students who leave early will get their test kits distributed earlier in the day before they leave.
Perfect, and great question. So again, the tests ultimately will be voluntary. The district, the county is not requiring any family to make students administer a test. It's completely voluntary. But as a courtesy, the county and school system are paying for these tests for each student to have one, and we really hope that you'll use them. So looking forward, what are our daily student expectations? We're going to be asking, like we have all year, that students wear a mask on school grounds, at the bus stop, on the bus, okay, and anywhere while on campus or in the school building. If a student should need a mask, sometimes they break on the way to school in the morning, or they were late waking up and they scrambled in the car with mom and dad and got all their stuff together, and whoops, they're walking right to the front door and someone's greeting them like, oops, I completely forgot I didn't have a mask on. Please see a member of the security team or our front office where we do have masks on hand to be able to give to students. we're asking and going to be verbally reminding students wherever, whenever possible to maintain physical distancing. What I've been saying is if you can reach out your hand and touch someone, you're too close. Okay. And I do believe at most times of the day, it is possible for students to do that if they're being intentional about it. There are times when it's more difficult throughout the day to do that. Lunch being one of those times when it is more difficult to do that. But for the most part, I do believe students can maintain at least an arm's distance of from one another throughout the entire school day, except perhaps during lunch. We're asking students to continue to wash your hands frequently. The CDC says every 2 hours, or to sanitize often, and to make sure that we're wearing the appropriate mask. There are new guidelines that are coming out related to masks and which ones are definitely not acceptable. Bandanas and gaiters, the sort of scarf-like things that people have been kind of pulling up, athletes and such, been pulling up over their mouths and noses, are not going to be acceptable. We're going to be requiring that any student who does show up wearing those, that they will have to put on an appropriate and well-fitted mask. The KN95s or the N95s are the gold standard as far as masks. We are not going to be requiring or able to require that all students or all staff have them because they just don't exist at that quantity. Like they're not available enough and they're more expensive. But you can see here having masks that have 2 or more layers, if they're cloth of breathable fabric, and they should fit snugly, all right? Always over the nose. One of the questions that a lot of students and staff and parents have had is like, what are we going to do to make sure that students are wearing their masks appropriately? And we're going to do the best we can to continue to monitor, to verbally remind, and then eventually, if we have to, we would have to remove students from the learning environment if they refuse to comply with this. We have not really had any instances this year where a student has blatantly, or a staff member, no one has blatantly refused to comply with the mask requirements. What we do see often, though, is people can get lazy about it, where it just starts slipping off and becomes more of a chin strap than it does an actual face covering mask. And we are going to be just more forceful as an administrative team, as a school community, verbally reminding people of that and not giving as many multiple reminders. We're going to maybe a 3 strikes you're out rule is what we're really talking about. Of course, if we have to remind you 3 times in a class period or 3 times throughout the day to appropriately wear a mask, we might have to do a call home and have students be picked up to just as a reminder of the importance of this safety procedure. Aside from physical distancing and testing, wearing a mask is really our last tool at our disposal for preventing this airborne illness from being communicated. Questions about masks, team, that have come up? Anything?
Yeah, your team is answering the questions. So that's the thing. So you want to check the chat if you've asked a question, because the administration has been answering your questions as Mr. K is presenting. So that's a great thing. So yeah, there's a lot of questions about masks, Mr. K.
Okay, great. Team, anything that I need to verbalize? Are we good?
Yeah, well, the one that is really coming up is the distribution of masks. How often?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. Just in all transparency, so we got a shipment today of 1,000 KN95 masks for our Bowie High School community. Now, we have 2,400 students and 250 staff members. Okay, so that doesn't cover half of our community for 1 day's worth. All right, so I don't have a good answer to what kind of frequency or capability we're going to have in terms of being able to distribute KN95 masks, if at all. And so we're trying to think about, as a community, what's the smartest and most equitable and strategic way of distributing the resources that we have available to us. Those masks are really pricey when you start adding up the number. Like if we were going to say we were going to give every one of the Bowie High School community, right, all 2,650 people a KN95 mask per day. They're pretty expensive. That money would add up really fast, and we certainly can't afford that just with our school budget. That's not even an option. And so I'll talk at the end of this. I do have a request. If families are looking, or if PTSO was looking to accept any donations, certainly KN95 masks would be a donation we would love and be happy to receive. But we can talk more about that later on as well.
Okay. Are you only answering questions about masks, or can you answer other questions?
I think I'll just kind of stick to this for now, and then have general Q&A for anything that isn't addressed through here, because I think a lot of questions will come up. So
Gotcha.
A general flow chart about related to quarantines. What do you do if you've tested positive for COVID-19? First, you're going to quarantine for at least 5 days. You should notify, if you're a student, notify the teachers, your administrator, and the nurse. We'll have that contact information here for you. And you can return to school if the fever is gone for 24 hours and symptoms are improving. You should continue to quarantine if those symptoms are not improving for at least 10 days.
Sorry,
Nurse Spate, did you want?
I just want to interrupt there because Nurse Spate just told me that there was an update to that hasn't hit PGCPS yet. So Ms. Spate, do you want to share that? We use directly from the district website, but I think that there's been a change.
Yes, Health Services updated that, and I think they were supposed to send an email to Mr. K with a spreadsheet, well, not a spreadsheet, but a PowerPoint presentation with all of that listed on there, because they didn't like the language improving. So they said it should be resolved.
Yeah, the CDC is using the word
resolved.
resolving symptoms, and that's, I think they're on the same synonym track here, but I understand resolving symptoms. One of the questions that comes up often related to this is people who have tested positive for COVID-19, one of the residual symptoms that they often have is like a kind of a nagging cough that is resolving, is improving, but persistent, particularly like in mornings or at nights, and for people I've known who've had this. And so is that a reason to continue quarantine? And that if you are, I guess the question and the way to answer that question, if you're a student, is to consult with our health services team. Say, hey, look, I've still got, this is the symptom I'm still presenting with. I'm approaching day 6. Please send an email to our health services team, administration. We'll help you come to a collective decision about whether or not returning seems like the safe and appropriate idea. Does that sound about right, Nurse Spate? Yeah. Second scenario, what if I've been exposed to COVID-19 and have not been boosted, if you haven't gotten a booster shot? And let's remember, only those who are actually eligible for a booster shot. Not everyone is eligible for a booster shot. It all depends on when your second dose of your vaccine was. So if you've received the Pfizer vaccine more than 5 months ago, or the Moderna over 6 months ago, and the J&J over 2 months ago, all right, you are eligible to be boosted, to get a booster shot. And if you haven't done so, all right, you fall under a different quarantine status. You essentially fall under the non-vaccinated rubric as far as quarantine statuses go. If you are eligible for a booster shot and you have not gotten a booster shot, you fall under the not vaccinated quarantine guidelines, according to the new health metrics and procedures. So again, quarantine for 5 days. Go ahead, nurse. Mm-hmm.
The document that I was referring to, they are not being as stringent on people who have not received a booster. They are not required to be tested weekly. They haven't gotten to that point yet, but they really haven't provided much guidance on if you haven't received a booster. They're not saying at this point you're considered unvaccinated. They're leaning towards it, but
no,
they haven't.
But right, so I know which PowerPoint you're talking about, and this is the language that came from it. So the quarantine guidelines, if you are not boosted and eligible for a booster, you fall under these quarantine guidelines. But what is true, you're talking about whether or not, like, for example, our staff who are not vaccinated are subject to weekly tests, COVID tests. But if they have if they're fully vaccinated with 2 and don't have a booster, they do not fall under the not fully vaccinated status. That's what I think you're referring to there, Nurse Spate.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And yeah, that's here. What we're really talking about is the quarantine guidelines. And so if a student or staff member is eligible for a booster, but hasn't gotten it yet, they're going to follow the not fully vaccinated quarantine guidelines, which is to quarantine for 5 days, to notify teachers, administrator again. And you can see here, if there are no symptoms, you must test with a rapid antigen test on day 5 after the date of the last exposure. If it's positive, then you follow the positive test guidelines. If negative, you can return to school. Okay, and we're hoping that obviously now that families will have a lot more access to these tests, that it'll be easier to be able to do so. Lastly, if I have been exposed to COVID-19 and have been boosted, okay, you should test with a rapid antigen test on day 5 after the last date of exposure, okay? And so day 0 is considered the date of exposure or the date of the positive test. Day 1 is the day after either of those incidents. So day 0 is when you've tested positive, that's day 0, and day 1 is the following day. If you were exposed to someone, day 0 is the day you were exposed, day 1 is the following day. So that's how we count the days in these instances. I know this is, I think it's a very clear flowchart, and thank you, team, for putting it together, but there's a lot of if-then statements in here where it gets really kind of muddy pretty fast as we're all trying to figure out, where do I fit into this rubric and what do I do? And so if you're unclear of what next steps are, we're always here to help support. We'd want to err on the side of caution wherever possible. I think we already talked about this, the wearing of face masks and the importance of it. We're asking all families, all parents to please help monitor this in your students and children before sending them to school, right? If anyone is experiencing COVID-like symptoms, including a fever, 100.4 or higher, flu-like symptoms, sore throat, cough, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, etc., particularly loss of taste or smell, to please keep them home. Nurse, do you want to say anything about that?
I'm sorry, I was reading something else in the PowerPoint that I wanted to talk on. So I'm sorry, what was your question?
I was just saying, is there anything else you wanted to say related to if families, for example, one of the questions we have, we get regular from families like, hey, I'm going to keep my child home from school today because they're exhibiting the symptoms. Do you have any procedures that you'd like families to follow if their child is presenting with COVID-like symptoms? Do you want them to call the nurse's suite or to email? How would you like them to move forward in those instances?
They can call, they can email, but now that they're going to have the rapid test at home, they can test them if they're exhibiting symptoms. And it may or may not be COVID related, but it could still be an ailment that's not COVID. But one of the things that I wanted to mention that anyone who does test positive for COVID, that you should not get tested for 90 days because you're going to still have the antigens in your body and you will still show a positive. So that's an FYI for anyone that has tested positive for 90 days, do not test.
Hey, could you repeat that one more time for everyone? Because I think that's a critical piece of information. It applies, unfortunately, to a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
If you have tested positive for COVID, you should not get tested for 90 days because the antigens stay in your body for at least 3 to 6 months. But their recommendation is for 90 days, do not get retested.
And so if there's someone who tested positive over winter break, maybe just before the holidays, say, December 23rd, they tested positive, they're outside the 10-day quarantine window, all of their symptoms have resolved, that student is free to return to school, right, Nurse Spate?
That's correct.
We don't need any proof of a test. We don't need any other information. That student is free to return to school.
Correct.
And then also, as you were saying, though, any additional rapid tests or PCR tests aren't really going to be important for the following 90 days. Like they're irrelevant, and so don't bother doing them.
That is correct. And also for the students that the parents have signed them up for weekly testing, any of them that have tested positive should not be retested for 90 days. So if they're on the list and they have tested positive at some point for COVID, they can't continue to be tested weekly.
Thank you, Nurse. And so here you can see we are blessed at Bowie High School to have 3 dedicated, amazing health professionals serving in our community. We have 2 campuses, our 9th grade campus where Nurse Spate has been serving predominantly, and then we have Nurse Suchi and Nurse Joyner who are also serving us at the main campus, grades 10 through 12. And so this is their email addresses if you should you need to reach them or communicate with them about any of these types of questions. Team, are there any other questions that have come up related to symptoms or quarantine or anything like this that we want to address?
No,
I think we got them. I
just
think we got them for the most part.
right, that we're following district guidance. You know, we can't, a lot of these decisions can't be made at the Bowie level.
I noticed one of the questions in the chat, if students are getting weekly testing, do they have to do the testing at home? No. We encourage you to sign up for the weekly testing so that you don't have to do testing at home.
And the difference would be, right, though, that the weekly random testing is a PCR test, whereas the at-home test kits are rapid tests. And so I think, yeah, go ahead, Mrs. Mahoney, you were speaking of.
Yes, actually, and my apologies, Mr. Kautzer. If we could also, parents, if you could remind your scholars and let them know that you've signed them up for this, because sometimes when they come up, if they don't give consent, the provider may not move forward with testing them, right? So we may not have the opportunity to contact you back right at that moment to let you know that your student refused or denied testing at that time. So if you could please have that conversation with them in advance and let them know so they're not shocked. I'm very proud to say the last time we had random testing at the 9th grade campus, all students that were pulled did move forward with testing and they all tested negative.
And so we're clear, thank you, Mrs. Mahoney, the way that the random weekly testing is going to continue now. It used to be, we had about only 300 students who had been given consent prior to winter break. I'm happy to say that number has gone up several hundred. I'm hoping it will go up to almost 2,000 though, because what we're doing is we take a random percentage of those students. All right, before break, it was 10% of those students. Like say it's 300, we're going to take 10%. We're going to do 30 random students out of those 300 who got consent, and they're going to get weekly testing that week. But if we go to move it up to 2,000, we're now going 20% of the students who have been given consent are going to get randomly tested each week. And so the district has moved that needle from 10% to 20%. So more students are going to get consistent weekly random testing provided that they have consent. Note also though, parents, it's worth noting, and this goes along with what Mrs. Mahoney was saying, even though you may have provided consent, ultimately, if your child refuses to get tested, that's their right to refusal. There's no one is going to force a COVID test on an unwilling child. So just some basic rules of the road here. How are we going to have a great semester? Speaking of semester one ends, quarter two ends right away here on February 2nd. So we're approaching the end of the first semester, but we need students to continue wearing masks, covering your mouth and nose at all times. No neck gaiters, avoid the cloths, use a KN95. Stay home if you're experiencing symptoms. Encourage your parents to complete the consent form for the randomly selected weekly testing like we were just discussing, and create some positive peer influence about proper mask wearing. It's something we're going to continue to talk with our student leaders about, how we can just make it the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do. By and large, our students have been very good at it and very responsible about wearing masks. But as with anything, when you're dealing with thousands of people, there are people who are better at it than others and worse at it than others. And so we are going to be more forceful in our enforcement of these guidelines. And so parents, if we do call you about, hey, look, we've been having a hard time with Johnny wearing a mask, please know that we don't take any joy or pleasure out of making that phone call, but we could really use your help in reinforcing these expectations at home if we call you about it. So just please know you may be getting more phone calls than usual about mask compliance, and we just will be asking for your support in those moments if you get a call. Lastly, one of the big changes in the short term and going forward is there are going to be no spectators allowed at any athletic events for our winter sports through the month of January. Starting in February, right now, the plan is that attendance will be limited to 25% capacity. And we'll be regulating that capacity through the ticket sales in the same way that we were prior to break. The same digital ticket purchasing systems will be used. There'll just be fewer tickets to purchase. So my last slide here, I promise, is how can parents help? First, continue to stay engaged. You're all here, you're engaged parents, and we really appreciate your involvement in your child's educational process. That's what makes the difference more often than not between a student being really successful in school. So thank you for being here, but continue to monitor their academic progress in school max. Poke your nose in there. Are they completing their assignments, or are you seeing question marks? You're seeing zeros. There's the things that you can't explain, and your teenager's not giving you a good explanation to it either. That gives you good cause to send the teacher an email, all right, saying, hey, can you help me understand what I'm seeing in the grade book here? This is what my child is telling me. I'm not sure why these zeros are here. Can we figure out how this is? And like I said, we're approaching the end of the second quarter. We want to make sure everything is tight and right as we approach the end of the semester. Also, I would love to create a system where we can receive, and we are open and willing and ready to receive any PPE donations, particularly KN95 masks, hand sanitizers, and or disinfectant wipes. While we have some of these things to be able to distribute to our staff, they're in demand, and we'll never have enough of them. Okay, and so if you're able to donate them in any organized way, we will be happy to receive them if they are store-bought and approved by the CDC and FDA and everyone else. Okay. Last thing you can do is to thank an educator today. All right. This has been, a very trying time in education. Our educators are working extraordinarily hard every single day. We are still working through, vacancies where our teachers are covering for one another during their planning periods. They're teaching additional classes above and beyond their daily expectations. And this has a wear and tear on all of our educators who are working so hard at providing engaging, meaningful lessons for your students every single day. And I hope that, one of the things that I think has been beneficial about virtual learning is that our communities, our parents often get to see the amazing work that our educators do every single day. And so if you get a chance, you see a teacher doing something great, send them a quick note of thank you. And I think that can make more of a difference than you realize. So thanks. That's the presentation I had for today, but I still definitely have time to be able to work through any additional questions that may not have been addressed there and about anything.
Yeah, so
Hauser, can I, I'm sorry, Mr. Brent, Dr. Brent, can I just
what's up?
Quickly?
Go ahead.
Mr. Lee, do you want to correct what I wrote in the chat? I did say drop off donations, but I saw you had a different plan. So do you want to address that?
Well, yeah. In terms of donations, depending on the amount of donation, we definitely want to at least start with your child's administrator so they can direct you, especially if you're donating for a specific grade or group or class. You want to go through your child's administrator so they can direct you in terms of where to go. We will probably have a central location, but I know as parents, you want to make sure that your donation gets to your child. So my strong suggestion would be through the administrator. And I know we have lots of questions about lunch in the chat. So Mr. Counselor, I think that's what's coming up.
Yeah, let me just talk about it. I mean, yeah, it can be the elephant in the room. And there's no question that lunchtime is it's one of the higher risk, if not the highest risk time of day for our scholars, right? It's the time of day when they're not wearing their masks, they're sitting with peers, and they're, doing what anyone else does during lunch. They're eating food and having a drink and having a chat with their friends. And a totally normal thing, right? I mean, but what we're trying to do, one thing we've done is, and every year prior to COVID, we would normally have only 4 lunches at Bowie High School. And so we have in our main campus, 1,800 students in the main campus. You divide that by 4 lunches, you get about 450 students per lunch. What we did this year is create a 5th lunch to essentially divide that number further, right? So we moved from 450 students per lunch to about 360 per lunch on average. And that is at a responsible level for the size of our cafeteria. It's one of the ways that we think that, we can try to manage this without being too disruptive to our overall bell schedule day to day. It's increased the amount of time for a 3rd period and shortened some of the instructional time for the other periods. And I'm not happy about that. And we're constantly trying to re-examine whether or not that is the model we wanted to continue into the 2nd semester. But here we are, needing to maximize physical distancing during lunchtime and still utilize our cafeteria space. There's been a lot of conversations with our COVID compliance committee that we have at school about what is the smartest way to do this. And we've really put our best minds together to talk about it. Again, how do we maximize safety and minimize disruption to learning in the instructional day? And this is the plan we came up with for doing that. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But what we try to do during lunchtime is to create constant verbal reminders to students, to sometimes bordering on harassment, where we're asking them to spread apart, and when you're not consuming food or not drinking, to please put your masks back up. And we open the doors up to the side to increase air ventilation. We've opened up additional tables up on the stage areas, so we're not just all on the cafeteria floor, but also, so we've tried to maximize our space and the amount of time that we're using at the same time. And so these are some of the basic measures we've put in place related to that. We've explored other ideas about utilizing our small gym as an additional space, for like an additional cafeteria space. But honestly, we run into manpower and safety considerations of being able to safely monitor those children. Once you start opening up multiple cafeteria spaces, we don't have the staffing to be able to adequately monitor that at all times during the day. So these are the constraints that we're operating with. And I hope you'll understand why we're making the decisions we are.
So, Mr. Counselor, and thank you. There are a couple of requests in the chat in terms of alternatives for students to be able to eat their lunch. One, being in their car, and when the weather is conducive, we do open up an outside area, and students really do seem to enjoy that. Give them an opportunity to go outside and have a little social time together. So that is available when the weather is conducive. A couple of parents have asked in the chat, can the child go eat in the car? A lot of these things are at face value are great ideas, but they bring up other concerns that as parents and as educators, we are concerned about your child not being monitored. So if they go out to the car and eat, something happens in the parking lot, then we have a whole nother set of circumstances. So we are trying, as Mr. Coucher said, to the best of what's available to us to mitigate. We're creating some situations in the cafeteria that your students will see a little bit different when they come back in terms of QR codes and contact tracing. I know that doesn't soothe everyone's anxieties, but there are some things that we didn't have before that we're going to be putting in place.
All right. There was also, Mr. Counselor, a comment and a suggestion about parent volunteers. Can you speak to that? Because you mentioned about the lack of manpower, so speak to that.
Yeah, well, the district does have very specific guidelines for volunteering in the school system. If someone wants to reach out to me or to anyone on the administrative team, we can direct them to the procedures for becoming an official volunteer. But there are guidelines related to background checks and appropriate safety protocols related to our volunteer process in the school system. But yeah, I mean, if someone really wants to volunteer, we would love to entertain the ways that might be able to work. Again, so we'd have to go through all of those hurdles with fingerprinting, background checks, and the like. But if someone is really earnest about wanting to volunteer in certain ways, we welcome their support.
All right, your administration team covered it all for the most part in the chat. So thank you for your support.
Yeah. Thank you. And I want to, one thing, well, Mr. Lee just touched on this a little bit. One thing we are doing differently during lunchtime is going to be trying to step up our ability to contact trace more effectively during lunchtime. And so each lunch table is going to have a QR code on that table. And we're going to be asking students that when they go sit down at the lunch, they just simply scan with their phones if they have it, and then indicate in a Google form which table they were sitting at during which lunch. And that way, rather than have assigned seating during lunchtime, we still want students to be able to sit with the peers that they want to be able to sit with. But they'll simply scan a QR code, and that indicates which table they were sitting at, so that if it does turn out that a student becomes a confirmed positive case, that we can look back and say, okay, they were sitting at this table and this day and this lunch, and we can contact those families appropriately.
All right. Well, we want to thank you, Mr. Kautzer, and your administrative team for taking the time out to updating us on the critical information that we need to know so that our children are prepared on Tuesday. So we want to thank you again. And yeah, that's it. And good night, everybody. Thank you for coming out. We had at least over 200 and some people on the call. Please join PTSO so we can have that kind of support at our meetings. All right. So join us. Have a good night.
Thank you, PTSO, and Dr. Brent for your support, and the entire school team for being here as well. We really appreciate you all.
It's been a long day. I'm exhausted. I had to come straight home and help my son on his work before this meeting. And then, you know, I'm tired. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I know. I've been a first grade teacher's aide during this virtual learning and a principal. It's been hard to be effective at both. I'll put it that way.
Right. I hear you. Well, thank you. Thank you you have a great team. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Be safe and be in touch.
Have a good one.